Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Well, good evening, friends, and welcome to this January 23rd, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Tonight in the news, a lot of weather, not just in the United States, but in other parts of the world, too. Cameraman David Edwards captured the moment that a giant hailstorm rolled in over a town in England in the Lake District. Filmed from Kirkstone Pass at 14:30 Greenwich Mean Time today. The hailstones took both the cameraman and nearby cattle somewhat by surprise. You can hear it in the background, I believe, and for some reason the video looks a little dark, but there's the cattle. This hailstorm took the cattle and the cameraman by surprise, and these are some of the pictures that he got. Ooh! All right, you think your friend's cold? Look at those cattle out there in that hailstorm. Well, we're gonna leave them in the background here as we go on into the next story related to another storm that reveals an ancient forest on the Welsh coast in the UK. Recent storms have forced a stretch of the Welsh coastline back to reveal artifacts dating back to 6,000 years ago, according to this news report and the lead-in on it. The 4-mile section has recorded. By the way, friends, there's nothing wrong with your audio. I have had a little bit of laryngitis today. My voice is just barely coming back to me. So I said, okay, we're going to go ahead anyway, and I hope you can hear me and understand me okay. The VU meter over here, our new VU meter that I can watch, is getting full volume, so I'm assuming you can hear me okay. The 4-mile section has recorded 50 feet, exposing everything from antlers to items thought to be brought in from World War II. Richard Lister reports from the beach there and takes a closer look at remnants of a Stone Age forest.
Well, the tide's coming in now and beginning to obscure these tree stumps, but you can see these curious brown lumps are actually the remnants of an ancient forest going back to Stone Age times. And before the storms came in, this is just beach, it was golden sand. After the storms came through, they revealed these extraordinary lumps of ancient woodland. Now, actually a stretch about 4 miles long has been revealed, but the tide is coming in with such ferocity that it's pulling the sand in again, and all of this is going to be covered again in a matter of weeks. So if you want to see this beautiful stretch of what was once an extraordinarily dense woodland region full of birds and animals and home to hunter-gatherers in Stone Age times, you better come quick.
Okay, sometimes a storm can bring something kind of interesting like this. You know, friends, last night we went over 3 scriptures. If you weren't here last night or didn't see it, you might want to go back to our archive and take a look. I went through 3 scriptures that show from the Bible how God controls the weather, and including fire and hailstones and snow. One of the scriptures said. Now, I'm not going to go back over those again tonight, but we are going to go to a story out of Texas that includes a big fire. Firefighters struggle to contain a Texas townhouse fire. And friends, all we have on this is just raw video footage, no commentary with this video, so I'll just tell you that emergency crews are struggling to contain a massive fire that has engulfed a condominium complex in Dallas, Texas. The blaze started at the Timberland Lane townhomes last night. It's as yet unclear if any injuries have been reported as a result of the fire. Aerial images were taken by helicopter showing the housing complex built 43 years ago destroyed by this big Texas blaze. Now, at the same time in Texas, we've got a story that relates to an execution that occurred of a Mexican national. And this report came in just this afternoon, so this is a story from today, friends. The U.S. state of Texas has executed Mexican national Edgar Tamio Arias, convicted of killing a policeman in 1994. The decision to carry out the sentence sparked a diplomatic outcry and protest from Mexico, as you'll hear in this story with Bruce Garcia's reporting.
For days, Edgar Tamayo Arias' family in the Mexican town of Miacatlan held vigils for their relative as he sat on death row in the U.S. But their hopes for either a review of the case or at least a postponement of the sentence were quashed by Texan authorities on Wednesday night, when Arias was executed with a lethal injection for the fatal shooting of police officer Guy Gaddis in 1994. His lawyers say he spoke little English at the time of the crime, was mentally handicapped, and was not told by authorities that he could obtain legal help from the Mexican consulate. They asked the U.S. Supreme Court for a stay of execution, but all they could get was a postponement of a few hours. In Mexico, many say the decision is a sign of the fractious relationship between the country and its neighbor up north.
Vamos a buscar el sueño americano.
We go in search of the American dream and we live the American nightmare. We work all our lives trying to go forward. That is why people say they want to go to the United States. But I tell them, don't go, because it's living an American nightmare. But we're dying of hunger in our country, and we go there looking for a better life.
Tenemos que ir a buscarla.
Throughout the week, Mexicans took to the streets of Miacatlan to oppose the execution. This week, the Mexican Foreign Ministry said that Texas should review the decision because the right of access to protection provided by the Mexican consulate had been breached. But Texas officials have maintained their procedures met U.S. Supreme Court guidance. Bruno Garces, BBC News.
And friends, for this next story, it's been actually difficult at times to find some information on this. Let me put our chart up for just a moment. We haven't put that up yet. And review the fact that we look for our news stories primarily related to the seals of Revelation. There are other factors in the Bible that we look for as well. But this particular story that I'm going to tell you about now, that would relate to both the second seal and the fourth seal in a certain way. It relates to war and rumors of war. And rumors of war, of course, can mean potential war situations. And it also relates to the fourth seal, which Jesus Christ described in plain language with three different Greek terms that the gospel writers wrote up. One that you hear the most of is loimos, meaning disease epidemics, pestilences, the plagues of Egypt. But Christ also described this pale horse in plain language as having characteristics of seismus and tarake, meaning in the Greek, the seismus meaning seismic conditions or activity such as commotions in the air like gale force winds and so on, and commotions on the ground like earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and tsunamis and floods and fires, etc., etc. But the tarake in Greek, defined in an English Greek lexicon as troubled waters, and it can mean that both literally and figuratively. And in a figurative sense, it gives the examples of mobs and seditions. And so I say this next story relates just a little bit to the fourth seal, especially to the second seal, war and rumors of war. And, you know, last night we brought you the story about Israel having discovered Al-Qaeda plot that I'll mention more fully in a moment as I tell you that a U.S. official, you know, and that's one reason why this has not been predominant in the news since yesterday. Usually this kind of story, if it were anywhere else, wow, you'd have story after story and video after video on it. But no, and I think this story that we have for you to tell you about right now tells you the reason why. And that's this. A U.S. official downplayed today the discovery yesterday by Israel of an Al-Qaeda cell or clan that it said was plotting to bomb the American embassy in Tel Aviv, describing the group's plans as, quote-unquote, aspirational. Israeli authorities said yesterday 3 members of a militant cell run by Al-Qaeda in annexed East Jerusalem had been arrested for plotting a wave of attacks across the country. A U.S. official, however, said that while the and friends, my teleprompter just dropped right off. There's more to that story. I'll dig that out for you by Sunday night. That's our next report time. Our next story, though we've got quite a bit more news, but just be aware there is more to that story about Israel finding that Al-Qaeda plot, discovering that Al-Qaeda plot yesterday, and preventing it from being a blowing up of another U.S. embassy, the one in Tel Aviv. And does the United States thank Israel? They discovered that plot and prevented an embassy from being blown up. That would have been another, what's the best way to say this? Another thorn in the crown of the President of the United States. You know, he's already got Benghazi working against him, which he's somehow managed to just sweep under the rug. You know, there was talk for a while about impeaching him over that. And all of those people that demonstrators who went to Washington earlier this week regarding anti-abortion protests, standing out in cold, freezing weather, demonstrating, you know, a salute to you in one way. But you were working against a president who has just chosen to ignore that, and who's also chosen to ignore the constitutional law that defines marriage. And we've got a president who has set a precedent of not following law, of lawlessness. And instead of holding a demonstration that he and other legislators are going to ignore regarding your stand on anti-abortion, for which I salute you because that's very biblical, to be against abortion. It's murder. It is indeed murder. And people will have to answer before the Creator when they stand before His throne at the great white throne judgment. There'll be a lot of people having to answer on that one. But you know, you might have done better and had a better cause if you had said, look, we're against abortion, and the best way to get things rolling, the laws in favor of pro-choice and being able to keep a baby alive a little better, would be to have had your demonstration to let's impeach this lawless president. I mean, this is a country that selects its president based on, but you know, I know I'm going to get in trouble with a few people if I take that hypothesis too far, because some people do understand that the powers that be are ordained of God, and God does place in office sometimes the basest of men, and He does that based on what the majority of the people in the country deserve. And so this country has what it deserves in the president that we have. So I was just really giving you something to think about. You might have had a better demonstration if you had had a demonstration to impeach the president. It might have woken up a few people to stop sinning. You know, because God gives us what we deserve, and there are a lot of people in this country who are sinning big time. We lead the way in morality. No wonder we have a lot of the problems that we have, friends. And you know what happened in Texas could wind up causing another problem for this country, because suppose Mexico decided to come in and retake the land that was taken during the Spanish-American War. What if the Mexican War? What if they came in and decided to retake Texas or retake California? You know, there'd be a battle to deal with. All right, let's cover though next what's happening overseas with the Davos World Economic Forum that started out in Montreux and has now moved over to Geneva. Throughout the World Economic Forum, some of the leading participants have been speaking to the BBC about issues on the conference agenda. Here in this video clip are some highlights of what they've been saying during the day today, including London Mayor Boris Johnson and actors Goldie Hawn and Matt Damon.
War criminal to some, a saviour to his supporters in Montreux today. The fate of President Assad is the main issue of this conference. These are not yet direct talks between regime and opposition, but at least they're in the same room. Syria's foreign minister had this to say about the regime's opponents.
The media load these people, these terrorists, by claiming they are moderate, but they know full well they are extremists and terrorists.
The UN Secretary General accused him of using inflammatory language.
Yourself, you live in New York, I live in Syria. I have the right to give the Syrian version here in this forum.
Yes, of course, I do not
After 3 years of suffering, this is my right.
This, we have to have some constructive and harmonious dialogue. Please refrain from any inflammatory remarks and accusing.
Mr. Ban's usually quite mild-mannered, but these are intractable issues. The opposition insist Mr. Assad cannot be part of a transitional government.
All the victims in Syria are just to allow one man to remain on his throne. No throne has the value of one single innocent life.
There is no way possible in the imagination that the man who has led the brutal response to his own people could regain the legitimacy to govern. One man and those who have supported him can no longer hold an entire nation and a region hostage.
No one should have worried that the diplomatic niceties would obscure the real issues here. One side thinks these discussions should be all about regime change. The other side believes the talks should be about anything but a transition of power. And at the end of a first day of meetings, the two sides seem as impossibly far apart as ever. The latest fighting. Perhaps 130,000 people have died in Syria. President Assad has clung on to power, but he can't win an outright victory. Neither can the rebels. The hope of this conference lies in both sides recognising that fact and beginning a dialogue. Paul Wood, BBC News, Montreux.
Friends, the UN mediator for Syrian peace talks, Ladder Brahimi, is to hold separate talks with rival delegations to assess their willingness to meet together. The behind-the-scenes negotiations follow the first day of a major peace conference in Switzerland, which ended in bitter divisions. Mr. Brahimi's initiative takes place before full talks resume tomorrow. It remains unclear whether the two sides will negotiate face-to-face as planned by the UN when talks restart tomorrow. BBC diplomatic correspondent Bridget Kendall in Montreux says that while the peace process may have got off to a rocky start with heated disagreements on yesterday, at least neither of the two rival delegations from the government and the opposition walked out. And friends, I think we have a couple of pieces of video related to this. Let me see if I can introduce this for you. On this one, Lagder Brahimi is not sure he'll get the two sides to talk face-to-face as planned, as I mentioned, and both say they will come to the UN brokered talks due to begin tomorrow. But the BBC correspondent says that how these talks will work is still not certain. Mr. Brahimi has revealed that he still does not know if the two sides are even prepared to sit in the same room. You know, friends, all this is helping to write the lesson in history that God wanted to write in the 6,000 years of man trying to govern himself under the influence of Satan the devil, who still sits on the throne of this earth as the God of this world. And by the way, I'm glad that thought came to my mind, because last night I was looking for that scripture in 1 Corinthians 4:4. It's second. Some of you probably were sitting there saying, Steve, just flip over one book. It's 2 Corinthians 4:4. Well, as soon as we were off the air, I got it. And I'll just read that scripture real quickly to you. If you want to go with me, we're talking about 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 4. 2 Corinthians. And it says there, in whom, I'll back up just a verse so we have a little flow to it. It says in verse 3, but if our gospel be hid, it's hid to them that are lost, in whom, verse 4, the God of this world hath blinded the minds. Can the God of this world do that? Read the scripture right here. It says, in whom the God of this world has blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. You know, that reminds me of Revelation 12, verse 9, many of you know, that talks about the whole world being deceived by that old serpent, the dragon, and Satan. But listen, we only have a few minutes to go. I want to get a few more stories in and finish up this story. Mr. Brahimi intends to consult all of the participants privately, separately today, to gauge what is possible for tomorrow. He says what we will try to do is talk about how to end this bloody war, and for that I think we have a kind of roadmap in the communique. We'll see how we use that platform to best effect, Mr. Brahimi said. We have no illusion that it's going to be easy, but we're going to try very hard. Well, try as they may, it'll be interesting how this comes out, regardless. Let's see if we've got something on this video. I think we do. We're going to have from Iran. Let's see if it's explained here for us.
Syria has been engulfed in a major catastrophe, and the people have borne the brunt. As you pointed out in your comments, millions of innocent people have been killed, have been injured, or made homeless and refugees. In this cold winter, this only adds to the misery. It is a miserable situation and very sad. Of course, we also have to be sad and concerned with the presence of terrorists, and such terrorists pouring into Syria. They are ruthless killers. Sometimes they kill innocent bystanders, and in other instances fight amongst themselves. This is indeed sad. Iran believes that everyone, all of us, should try our very best to first put a stop to bloodshed inside Syria. Later, all of us should work together to push terrorists out of Syria, and also advise their supporters, countries who support them, that this is not to their interest. The next stop will be their country for terrorists. Later, we have to pave the way for the opposition to sit around a table with the government. The best solution is to organize a free and fair elections inside Syria. No outside party or power can decide for the Syrian people and Syria as a country. We should all come together to help the people. At the moment, we are sending a lot of humanitarian aid, including medicine, foodstuff, so on and so forth, for Syrian people. We are helping them. Everyone should help the Syrians.
And friends, we have one other video. We just have a couple minutes to go. I'm just going to go right straight into it. It relates to the same story.
The following report contains some disturbing images.
This evening, Ukraine held its breath. The police on the front line kept their formation.
Okay, my apologies. It does not relate to the same story. However, it is an important story related to how the EU may eventually reshape or come together. Violent protests in Ukraine have spread beyond the capital, Kiev, as President Viktor Yanukovych held crisis talks with 3 opposition leaders. Until now, anti-government protests had been focused solely on the capital, but government buildings have been stormed in at least 3 other cities. And we interrupted him. Daniel Sanford, please continue on with your report now from Kiev.
But without danger. After 4 days of savage riots, there was a truce, while opposition leaders held talks with the president.
It's an uneasy peace, the burning tyres from the barricades still smouldering, the scars everywhere of the battles of the night before, and behind those, the lines of riot police still guarding the National Parliament.
Today, what the demonstrators are calling their revolution started to spread. They seized government offices in several other regions. This was the moment when the governor of the Lviv region was forced to sign his own resignation. And fury over how protesters have been treated by the police this week has fueled the revolutionary fervour. As well as the very public beatings, protesters have been stripped naked and humiliated in temperatures of -10 Celsius. The Ministry of Interior apologised for what it called unacceptable actions and said they were investigating.
And friends, we're running short on time tonight. We're almost out of time, and I want to be sure and cover this next story for you as we close out. Sinkhole opens up on a Detroit street in the United States.
It's usually a busy street in downtown Detroit, but traffic's being disrupted after a sinkhole around 14 feet wide and 8 feet deep opened up. Work's underway to try and repair the road. It's not known what caused the sinkhole.
Friends, thank you for joining me tonight, this Thursday night. That's it until Sunday night. And God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again Sunday night with more news from the current day related. And, of course, we'll cover Friday and Sabbath and Sunday on Sunday night. news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, friends, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth saying, so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.